Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is the Thursday, the 18th of April, 2024 meeting of Executive, and I'm Councillor Claire Douglas, and I'm the leader of the Council, and this is one of the two main decision-making bodies of the Council. And so going straight to the agenda, just looking for apologies. We've got apologies from Councillor Kate Revilius due to the job share that she has with Councillor Kent, and Councillor Kent is here with us this evening. The next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Does anybody have a declaration of interest at all? No declarations of interest. Thank you for that. Next item on the agenda is the minutes. And there was just one thing that I wanted to raise about the minutes that perhaps Councillor Eyre could clarify. Under the declarations of interest, it said Councillor Eyre declared that he had a personal interest in relation to agenda item 5, procurement of Health Watch York, as he worked for a Health Watch contract provider in Bradford. Is that worked or works?
Works, unless you've seen it P45.
Currently. Sorry, I mean, I'm not aware. I'm just why I'm asking you. So it's incorrect in the minutes then. So if we can change it from worked past tense to works currently, that would be great. Apart from that, I didn't see any other anything else that I thought needed changing. So can I see the acceptance of the minutes, please, with that one adjustment? Thank you, everybody. So those are approved. The next item on the agenda is public participation, and today we have one public speaker, and that's Councillor Hollier, who wants to speak on agenda item 6, which is the ward funding allocations 2024-2025. Councillor Hollier, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, thank you. So you have 3 minutes. And so if you want to start, would you like me to give you a 30-second warning?
No, it should be fine, thanks.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm urging members to reject the officer advice to pick model A, which is clearly deeply flawed, and instead to choose either options G or H, which I'm grateful to officers for including in this pack. To see the issues with model A, you need only look at the top 2 lines and the figures for Acomb and Bishopthorpe. Acom's IMD score is about twice that at Bishopthorpe at 11.76 to 5.87. And under this model, it received about twice the funding overall at £12,000 to £6,000. That sounds fair enough. However, Acomb has more than twice the number of residents as Bishopthorpe at 9,111 to 4,136. This means that despite Bishopthorpe having an IMD score half that of Acomb, its residents actually receive £1.50 per head, compared to Acomb residents who receive £1.35 per head, so 10% less despite being twice as deprived. This clearly makes no sense if the aim of the system is to target funding at more deprived wards. So I'm at a loss why the system is being continued when there are obvious ways of making it fairer presented in G and H. But if option A is chosen, please can we refrain from claiming that it is targeting funding into more deprived areas when it is plainly doing the opposite. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollier. We will take your comments into account when the report is discussed and considered later in the meeting. Right, so next item on our agenda, agenda item 4, is the forward plan. Can I see those in favour of the forward plan as it exists? Yeah, thank you very much. So that's approved as well. Thank you. And then we move on to the substantive items, which starting with item 5, which is the advertising contract. And we have Peter Roderick here to speak to that, I assume. Is that right? Yes. Thank you, Peter. So Claire's not joining us this evening.
Thank you. Well, that's a very interesting point, Councillor, because I was expecting Claire Fold to be here to present on the advertising contract aspects of this. I would suggest she is better placed than me to do that. I can speak on the public health bits.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
could, of course, try, if possible, to move this up the agenda and take it a little later, and we can try and contact Claire through Teams. That might be the best
Yes,
course of action.
please. I think that might be the
Sounds
first approach. If
good. I'll defer then and try and
if you
get
could
Claire
go
on
and
Teams.
see where she is, that would be great. Thank you very much. Right, so let's move number 5 then to the point when Claire is with us, or we have an update on her attendance. Next item then is the item number 6, which is the ward funding allocation 24-25, and we have Pauline Stutchfield and Laura Williams here to introduce that to us. Thank you very much.
Hello. Okay, so report on ward funding allocation for 24-25. There's a £250,000 budget which is allocated across the city to various wards. In July 2023, with the new administration in place, it was proposed that ward funding be allocated according to a different model, which was that there was a minimum ward budget allocated for members to spend on their priorities in line with the kind of action plans and priorities for their wards. A second element, which was then to be based on need, and then a single pot for citywide applications. So funding model A was taken forward last year. That was subject to post-decision scrutiny. And at that scrutiny meeting, we committed to bringing back to scrutiny and then to executive this year, further work around different models as to how that could be allocated, which have been through scrutiny. 2 additional options, which were G and H, were added into the paper for your consideration this evening. And we are asking you to approve one of the recommendations below. We've suggested existing model A or any of the other options outlined in the report, obviously, is within your gift. So yeah, it's just for you to make a decision on how it's going to be allocated, essentially.
Thank you, Laura. Pauline, do you want to say anything at this point? No. Okay, thank you. Right. So as we do regularly at executive, if you'd like to speak on an item, if you can indicate at the beginning, that would be great. And one go at speaking. So thank you for that. Councillor Eyre, do you want to start? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We welcome the long overdue acceptance from the Labour Group of the value of ward funding. And I'd also like to thank Councillor Pavlovic for the time and engagement with members that he himself has put in getting to where we are. It is a very positive thing that we're no longer arguing over the value of empowering local communities to deliver what is important for them. Having said that, though, there are clear differences in how we choose to approach that. We all share the view that council resources should be targeted at those most in need. This needs to be considered in the whole and in the context of the council's total £150 million budget. The total sum of money discussed here is less than 0.1% of the budget, and the amount being redistributed is probably around half of that. The reality is, while it will make tiny differences in some areas, it has the potential to hugely impact the most deprived residents in other areas. Strensall, for example, has lost its youth club entirely. This is because, while the principle is right, the mechanism lacks the finesse to understand where tipping points may be, or where, as I have often said, crucial community-based assets do or do not exist. A small amount of money in one area may allow a youth club to open for 4 days instead of 3 days. Elsewhere, much larger funding would be required just to offer 1 day. That is why in the past we have always adopted Model C as the best option. The mere fact that we have 8 complicated options, a scrutiny meeting that had neither the resource nor office capacity to analyse them properly, shows the overcomplication of such a small pot of money. And as was alluded to by the speaker, it doesn't achieve what it sets out to. While some wards, such as Westfield and Clifton, are shielded from the worst of the changes, Bishopthorpe and Fulford are ones to gain. Few people see sense in a model that takes funding out of Hull Road and gives it to Bishopthorpe and Fulford. And as has been mentioned again, it is not true that the most deprived areas are benefiting as a result of this administration. Under our previous model, Westfield received over £35,000. This year, that will be less than £25,000, a 30% cut to community funding in the most deprived ward.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pavlovic.
Almost forgot to turn the thing on. Thank you, Chair. And I really wanted to thank the officers, both the officers that are here tonight, and also in business intelligence, and particularly in Cunningham, who's worked incredibly hard in putting what is a very complex, and we did talk about how complex this area was, where there were a series of possible options together. But we did say at the last, when this was introduced last time, that we would bring it to corporate scrutiny. And we did bring it to corporate scrutiny with a variety of options. And it was a very interesting debate, because even at that scrutiny, there was no consensus amongst the members, and that's the members across all the parties. The chair, for example, could see the validity of Model A. Other people that were in attendance from the Labour group also thought there was other options that could have been taken. So it's not this is so obvious that it can only be one thing. But the important thing is, and just to clarify the point that was made by the public speaker, there is a lump sum element. There's that £105,000 that is allocated to the ward, immaterial of its size, and that does skew the overall spend per head. It's the same in a 1 ward or a 3 ward. It's an overall figure. So what I did want to say is we've considered it, we talked about it, we've looked at it within a cross-party consensus. And I would also like to thank Councillor Eyre and Councillor Stewart for their work in the citywide pots. I thought that was a very productive day in which we were able to allocate that larger amount of money across the wider city area. So I think Model A is the right model. It does meet those areas of most significant need. It does take into account population, not the way Councillor Holly wants it taken into, but it does take into account population. And most importantly, and most disappointingly, I have to say, it's a shame that we weren't able to spend the whole amount of ward funding this year. Certain wards, and I'm not going to name them, were really quite significantly underspent. And I think the argument about taking into account population would have had more validity had those larger wards, and I'm not going to say which party they were, but they weren't the Labour members, were able to actually spend the ward funding that they'd been allocated. So I do commend and propose the recommendation from the officers.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Pavlovic. And I think that the points you raise are really important, and particularly in an environment of diminishing resources as well, making sure that they are targeted into the places with the most disadvantage in the city. And we know exactly where they are, and Model A does reflect that, but also does provide a base budget to those areas that are our least disadvantaged in the city, so that everybody has some money to invest in their wards. So I'm rather disappointed that the Councillor Eyre continues to say that this isn't a model that works. It does, and there has been some fantastic investment in much needed resources that adhere to our 4 principles of equalities, affordability, climate and health across the city, and are getting to the people that most need it. And I can definitely say within my ward in Heworth that is absolutely the case, bringing benefits into the pockets of people that need it and feeding families, tackling social isolation, really, really key projects. So ward funding is an element that has disappeared from some budgets in other local authorities. That has not happened in York. We're delivering on our commitment to the communities, and we are very committed to them. So I would like to support Councillor Pavlovic's advice on the acceptance of Model A, and the recommendations are on page 59 at paragraph 10. So please can I see those who are in favour of that recommendation? Thank you very much, everybody. And so that's Model A is approved on item number 6 on the agenda. Thank you very much. Right, shall we go back to, do we want to continue so that, yeah, let's continue with item number 7 then. So next item we have is consultation on equity, diversity and inclusion strategy for 24 to 27. And we have Pauline Stutchfield, Laura Williams and Arif Sain with us here today. So thank you for joining us. And who's going to start off? Pauline, off you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm delighted to introduce Arif Sain from Inclusivity Global, who has assisted in our work so far and helped us to move significantly forward in a very quick period of time to help us deliver this important work against our court commitment around equalities and human rights. Can I just point out that there is a typographic error at paragraph 12, recommendation C, around the date that should quote autumn 2024 rather than 2023 for the approval of the final strategy and action. Point that out. Thank you. So just rather than going through the report in detail, if I can focus around the 3 recommendations, because there's some quite significant work here that's been undertaken, and the report presents the work of Arif in assessing us independently against the framework for local government. And you will see there verbatim Arif's words: wanted to absolutely be transparent about where we are as an organisation and therefore where we need to move to over the next 3 years, which is to achieve excellence against that equalities framework. So the first recommendation is very much around that. The full report is in Annex A. And you can see at the summary of the table in table 9, paragraph 19 at the table there, in terms of our assessment against the framework, we are developing, i.e. meeting the baseline requirements of the framework and against the Equalities Act on all areas, and achieving with regard to our external relationships and partnership arrangements across the city, which is really pleasing for us to hear. This will require a 3-year programme of action to achieve excellence against the framework, and the following work has already commenced or been completed. So I'll just list a few of those. So for example, we're publishing for the first time ever this year an ethnicity pay gap report and analysis, which will explore with our communities and also our staff group to see what's underlying those findings, and hopefully again baseline our position so we can demonstrate our improvement going forward. We're updating our equalities impact assessment we use for all of our reports that you'll see on the agenda tonight, and so that will become a human rights and equality impact assessment, and we're working with the Applied Centre for Human Rights at the University of York on that development. Gypsy and traveller work has been completed in co-producing action plans with the community, and you'll be receiving a report on that at the next executive. We recently, members recently approved the policy on the social model of disability, and there was before Christmas, the approval of the city's anti-racism strategy and the CYC's own action plan. A job description has been drawn up for our new head of equality, equity, diversity and inclusion, and the growth that was in the budget will contribute to that position. We are taking part in a cross-city partnership anti-racism task group, and we look forward to that work with IER UK 3.0, who we've worked with before, and delighted to see the re-establishment of the Human Rights and Equalities Board. And we're currently with that board reviewing the Human Rights City network reports around the human rights indicators and the work that's gone into addressing the recommendations in that report. And I'm pleased to say our Chief Operating Officer, Ian, is leading a new corporate equalities group. So there'll be a next level of governance around this work in which, again, all our staff groups will be represented and will be showing clear leadership around this across the council. In terms of the second recommendation, you'll see at the second annex a draft strategy that's arisen from the work that Arif's done with us, which will be used as an interim strategy pending the outcome of consultation if members agree that we can proceed to consultation tonight. We will need to use the equality objectives that are in that draft strategy at agenda page 131, as we are required by as part of our public sector equality duty to publish those objectives every 4 years, and we're well overdue on that. You'll see in there objectives around making sure that we improve equity practice at corporate service and individual levels throughout the council. So we'll make sure that's built into our performance management framework. And importantly, we'll be providing training and support for staff and members to help them meet their duties under the Act. In terms of the third recommendation then, is to ask members to approve a period of consultation on the draft strategy, and we'll bring that results of that consultation and a detailed action plan back to members in autumn this year. In terms of how we conduct that consultation, we'll learn from our recent success around transport consultation. We want to take it out to our communities. Our communities, teams and councillors, hopefully all councillors will help us with that engagement. We want feedback from those who are leaders in EDI in the city, and we want to talk to people at their places of celebration and festival, such as the Pride Festival and our City Festival. We want to work with partners in terms of health and social care system, including Health Watch and the EDI work they're doing in response to needs assessment and listening to communities themselves. We'll make our consultation accessible and easy to give feedback in all forms, and we'll listen to all ages, including the voice of children and our older residents. So I'm asking members to approve those recommendations. And finally, I'd like to say thank you to Arif, who's conducted his review with professionalism, and on the way, he's also been helpful to all the in respect of all the questions that we've asked him on a wide range of subjects while we're here. We've taken full advantage of his work and his work on the assessment. And just finally, if I can, Chair, offer the opportunity for Arif to say a few words.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pauline. And Arif, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, firstly, can I thank you all for asking Inclusivity Global to do this piece of work with you. It's been a pleasure working with the officers and the senior leaders and the political leadership on this. It's been a great opportunity working with the communities in York. You have a fantastic history of the human rights in this city. You have a very active disability group, which has been active for many years. And then you have a very active BAME group amongst others. And it's great to be working in a city where you've got such a vibrant, active voluntary sector. And it was a real pleasure. What communities are really asking for is basically that with the things are co-produced and they're really welcoming what the council was doing, really helpful to me in terms of giving me their thoughts and being honest. They thought it was great that the council has brought us in to do this piece of work with them. And the whole aim was to identify clearly, not just go through a tick box kind of charter mark, but to identify what were the real needs of our communities, rather than just doing a cut or paste strategy, understanding where they're being from, and actually developing a strategy which basically starts the process. So the equity and diversity policy inclusion strategy is basically a platform to get to achievement. And then what we hope to do is that which I'm helping you to do is develop case studies and initiatives which can fill that platform. But these are co-produced with your stakeholders. I truly believe there's some fantastic initiatives that you're doing here in New York that other local authorities, having worked the breadth of the UK, are not doing. The anti-racist city strategy. It's not a pledge. It's not a tick box charter mark, which is absolutely brilliant. It's actually a fundamental piece of work that you've co-produced with Black communities. The work they've done with disability communities is really making a difference to them. There are areas obviously of improvement, and they've told me what they are, and we've worked together to develop that. And there's in terms of the consultation engagement, it's hoped that will also be co-produced with those communities. So it's not kind of saying, this is what it is, what do you think of it? I think they will come back to you and say, these are the initiatives we want to do over 3 years. But thank you very much for asking me to do this work with you. And thank you to Pauline and the senior officers who are my commissioning officers.
Thank you, Arif, and a big thank you from all of us to you as well for your expertise and insight and putting together the report that's shown us, as you've said, what we are doing, but there's an awful lot of work to do in an area that I feel has been under invested in and focused on for a period of time, and we're starting to take action on that, which this report shows. So Pauline, do you want to say anything more at this point? No? Okay, well, thank you very much to all of you. It's really informative and helpful. And can I see who'd like to speak on this item then, please? Okay, Councillor Eyre, off you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously, we'd like to thank officers for bringing this paper, and in particular, thanks to Arif, who I think your history with York goes back nearly a decade, and I know you were involved quite heavily when we achieved excellence in the EFLG, going back about eight to 9 years. Yeah, I think this is a good step in the right direction to tackle the Council's commitment to addressing issues surrounding equity, diversity and inclusion. And obviously, we support the ambition to be recognised as excellent, as we have been previously. Within the draft strategy, it's especially pleasing to see responsibility for the delivery of it will sit with each executive member. I think diversity and inclusion are not things that can be compartmentalised and left to one person. It must be deep-rooted across the whole organisation. The report says the Council will use equality impact assessments across all its functions. We hope this is the case, and we are seeing much better EIAs being brought forward, and would like to see greater levels of consistency. The EIA for the Green Bin paper, for example, is somewhere a lot more detail we would have expected to see. So overall, happy to support the recommendations and happy to support this going out to consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Councillor Lomas.
Thanks again to Arif for the work that you did on this. I just wanted to give a personal thanks because I found the process of being interviewed for the assessment that you did actually really energising. And it really helped to focus where we need to apply our efforts in moving forward on some of these issues. So a personal thanks from me because I found it a really positive experience. What the report shows is that we have a long way to go. And Councillor Eyre mentioned that previously City of York Council was assessed as excellent, and that obviously has fallen away over a period of years. So we have a long way to go to get back to that excellent point. And we've got a lot of work to do, but I experience every day the determination, energy and commitment from my fellow exec members, fellow councillors across the chamber, from officers at all levels in the organisation to get to work and do that. And it's great to hear about some of the things that we're already doing that will really contribute positively to this piece of work. So it's quite exciting to see things getting underway, even though we know we've got a big challenge ahead of us. I think it's important to note that the priorities in our council plan really underpin this area of work, and we need to align every piece of work that we do, every decision that we make to those priorities, and this really supports that. It doesn't take away from it at all. And leadership is really important. I was talking to somebody just the other day, and we were talking about the importance of providing training for people so that they understand issues around equality, diversity, inclusion. But training is only one part of the equation. And unless you have leadership right throughout an organisation, really demonstrating those values in action, then you can have as much training as you like, and it won't make a real difference. One of the things that we are doing that we are developing, and as Pauline said, we're doing it in collaboration with the Centre for Applied Human Rights at the university, is revamping our equality impact assessment process into a human rights and equalities analysis that will go further than just the statutory minimum required of us, but will challenge us to think more critically about the impacts in terms of equality, diversity, human rights of the decisions that we're making. And that our aim and hope is to get to a position where that becomes a tool to support thinking, not a tick box that somebody does at the end of a process and hopes that it's not too bad. So we're really hopeful about that. It's being trialed in different parts of the council at the moment, so that we can work out the things that we need to improve about it to make it really work in that way. But we're really hopeful that that will cement that idea of we need to think about these things in our decision-making processes all the way throughout. It's not enough to just do a really long tick box at the end. And I particularly want to note that we have made a really public acceptance that the action plan to get us where we need to be cannot sit with us alone. This is not something that we can just say, oh, well, we've had a look at this and we think we should do these things. We need input from partners, from residents and people across the city. And I'm really proud of this approach because it helps us to remember that we're all part of a really diverse web of communities across the city. And Arif, you mentioned some of that. You mentioned some of the strengths that we have as a city. And it's really important that we acknowledge how much we can give to and take from those communities in supporting the development that we need to do and to get the positive outcomes across the city. And that is so that everyone in our city can benefit from the wonderful opportunities that it offers, the opportunities to be involved in civic society, the opportunities to have a safe, happy and healthy life, free from discrimination, free from oppression. But in consulting, we've got to make efforts to go to where our residents are and talk to them and not expect them to come to us. And I'm really excited by the plans that officers have got to make that happen. And wanted to reassure councillors, because I know that a couple of councillors have talked to me about this, that councillors will be briefed so that councillors can be part of that consultation as well, because councillors are out there every day, every week, in communities, talking to residents, working with residents, and it's really important that we're part of that conversation too. So I'm very grateful for all the amount of hard work that have gone in by everybody to this. And I commend the recommendations to my fellow executive.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas, and yeah, absolutely back up and support what you have just said, and this is hugely important to us. And I think you know, the fact that we're coming up on 12 months in administration now, and the progress that has been made in the last 12 months on some of our most challenging problems that the city was facing. And I am over the moon to see that the Human Rights and Equalities Board is now back up and running after much intense work to repair those relationships, and we are well on the way, and there's much more to be done. So thanks to everybody for their support. So I draw everybody's attention to the recommendations on this report that are on page 84, 83 and 84, A, B, C and D. So it's to note the results of the assessment work that has been done, endorse the draft equity, diversity, inclusion strategy at Annex B, and then approve officers to carry out a public consultation on the draft strategy to inform the final 3-year strategy and action plan that will come for approval in autumn 2024, as Pauline outlined the correction of the typo there. So can I see those who are in favour of that? Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you. Thanks for your attendance today. Right, I am going to now go to agenda item 5, which is the advertising contract. So that's Claire Fole and Peter Roderick are going to come to the table and introduce that to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, my many apologies for being delayed. I was caught in the rain. Oh, thank you. So we bring to you today the advertising contract, and we're inviting executive to do 4 things. Note the independent market appraisal findings which are set out in the report. The market appraisal itself is subject to commercial in confidence, so we're not sharing further. It's not a background paper. Approve the direct award of a 15-year contract for the bus shelters and freestanding digital units to JC Deco, delegating authority to approve the actual contract to the Director of Governance in consultation with the Head of Procurement and the Director of Public Health. Approve the waiver in line with the terms set out in the report, namely that the market appraisal provided a competitive overview of the value of advertising in York and therefore provided the basis for negotiation. And finally, approve the refreshed advertising policy, that it is embedded in the new and subsequent contracts, and that it includes the high sugar, high fat, high salt guidance developed by Public Health. Bus advertising in York currently makes around about £179,000 per year. This includes on bus shelters, roundabouts, boundary signs, and other areas. Today we are only talking about bus shelter advertising and freestanding digital units. It's worth noting that bus shelter advertising covers 3 different formats: print, digital, or no advertising at all. The contract itself covers a range of different sustainability measures that we're baking into the contract. It is an update of the 1996 contract that was negotiated, well, over 20 years ago now. And of course, the advertising sector has changed considerably since. Not only is it more sustainable, so JC Deco themselves have net zero targets aligned with ours, it is also an expectation now that the advertising sector includes digital, which is a complete change to where we were, of course, in 1996. Digital advertising on bus shelters and the freestanding digital items are themselves subject to planning. Depending on planning's perspective, we will have a minimum uplift of 20%, increasing our revenue considerably. That revenue is based on both rental value, so rental value of the bus shelters, and a different amount for the rental value of the freestanding units, combined with a percentage of the profit gained by the advertising agent, the advertising supplier, through advertising on digital advertising or print advertising. Digital advertising has a higher revenue and therefore we would get a higher income. The other benefit of digital is, of course, that the digital market expects that advertising cost to change depending on opportunities to see. And given that York has a high footfall, particularly in terms of Christmas markets and race events, that will give us a higher percentage yield. So we can achieve much more of a higher income. I'll stop about the contract just there and hand over to Peter Roderick, Director of Public Health, to talk about the change to the advertising policy itself.
Thank you, Claire. So on the advertising policy aspect of this then, what the proposal is to introduce the policy which is in one of the annexes, which restricts the advertising of foods high in fat and salt, sugar. It uses a very standard measure of that, which the Food Standards Agency have been using for a couple of decades now. And I guess the motivation behind this is that we know we have a rising number of people living in York who are not living with a healthy weight. We know, I mean, the broad numbers are 1 in 3 year 6 children, 1 in 4 reception children, and 2 in 3 adults. And those numbers are rising. And this is part of a package of measures, really, through the Healthy Weight Strategy, which are designed to support people to achieve and maintain a healthy weight. Particularly, I think my concern is generally for our children's health and well-being above all, and thinking about their susceptibility to marketing and advertising, which is quite clear from the scientific evidence. And so policies like the one that's in front of you, even though it might sort of seem a little unusual, actually are being adopted quite a lot. We think we're the 14th local authority who are proposing this policy. Transport for London were the first, and what they've seen after introducing it, and obviously bearing in mind marketing and advertisement on London transport networks is going to be quite large, because London has a lot of those type of adverts. But they've seen about 1,000 calorie reduction in consumption every week for children and young people affected by the policy, which is quite huge, really. So some real impact. So we hope that this will be, as part of our healthy weight strategy, a really supportive measure to achieve things within the health and wellbeing strategy. It's all set out in the report in terms of the way these things are defined, but quite an effective and now well-tested way of defining some of these food products, which other authorities are introducing across the country. So essentially, we're tapping into kind of standard model.
Thank you both for that. Very interesting facts on both sides, I would say. Can I see those who would like to speak on this, please? Okay, Councillor Eyre, do you want to start?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously very familiar with this. It's a saving that was included in last year's budget and seems to have stalled since that particular period. There's no evidence that we've been able to achieve the £125,000 this year. And to be honest, this paper gives me little confidence that the £500,000 will be achieved in this financial year. Of the three-pronged approach that's proposed, bus stops, the new freestanding units and roundabouts, this only really covers the issue of bus stops and suggests a meagre uplift of around about £30,000 a year, well below the target. The report gives no clear justification for not following procurement rules. I've double-checked the comments you made, Claire, didn't seem to be in the report, and having read the report, it merely says justifications have been provided that meet the waiver grounds, but those weren't published, so I've not had a chance to look at those. The suggestion that the council would pick up all capital costs is an extreme alternative and assumes that no competitors would be interested in bidding. Bristol have signed a contract with an alternative provider, a contract that included £2 million of social value to the city. Similarly, Chorley used an alternative provider and secured living roofs. Glasgow's tender for a similar service received 20 expressions of interest and 3 formal bids. The only basis for waiving formal procurement seems to be a contribution towards the Free School Meals Manifesto pledge of an unspecified amount. Residents may be questioning, and are questioning me, whether such offers in the future will see other bidders avoid competitive tendering. We have concerns over practicality and achievability. The freestanding unit approach has been trialled locally by BT and failed. It was rejected by the local planning authority and appealed by the National Planning Inspector. It is unclear from the paper whether the executive thinks this little mini Times Square would be deemed appropriate in the city. There have been significant issues with the time taken under the existing contracts to deal with antisocial behaviour at bus shelters. While replacing glass with perspex under a traditional advertising model is simple, complex screens will be far more challenging. We accept that energy will be from 100% renewable sources. However, reports on similar boards in Manchester showed that they use the equivalent of 3 households worth of electricity each year. Do we really think in a climate crisis that the only mitigation should be renewable energy?
Thank you, Councillor. Claire, would you like to respond to any of those technical aspects there? Is there anything you can provide?
Yeah, so the contract is still under negotiation, so we haven't ironed out all of the social value or of the cost. We've just set out in the report the absolute minimum uplift, not the actual uplift that we'll get through the contract negotiations. It is of course subject to planning, so planning could refuse digital and that would set us back considerably. The market appraisal for us went out to the main key suppliers, of which there's only 3 or 4. I'm not sure how Bristol got 20, but anyway, 3 or 4, which allowed us to understand what the market value of the estate would be. So the local, the public estate would be, which gave us the basis for the negotiation.
Thank you very much. It's very helpful. Councillor Lomas, would you like to go next? Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Claire and Peter, for the work that's gone into this. I just want to say a couple of things about some of the negotiation aspects of this. I appreciate that it's difficult when you're no longer in the administration, that you don't get to contribute to those negotiations anymore. And I appreciate that's frustrating for Councillor Eyre. But there are negotiations to be undertaken. They are being undertaken thoroughly on our behalf by officers. I am absolutely adamant that we put the most conservative estimate when there is a potential for differentials in income. We absolutely should put the most conservative estimate in, and if that passes our test and is still an increase, then it is entirely appropriate that that is the contract that we go with. Bearing in mind, we have the potential for achieving more than that. But I can feel our Chief Finance Officer beside me agreeing that it is entirely appropriate that we budget on the conservative estimates for these things. And as Claire quite rightly pointed out, the planning issues will determine where any digital advertising sits. That is right and properly their decision, and not for us to attempt to interfere in. I also just wanted to raise a couple of other issues that Claire and I have been in conversation about. A member of the Access Forum contacted us and wasn't able to attend tonight to speak in public participation, but has raised a few concerns which we've been able to address most of, concerns around the nature of digital advertising and whether there would be impacts for people who have visual impairments or other impairments that can be affected by flickering lights. And we've had it absolutely confirmed that that is not an issue with this type of advertising, and that it would also be equipped with auto dim technology to be turned off between certain hours. There are also other regulations about luminescence levels that are imposed by the planning authority, and those will be imposed as well. We absolutely would be guided by the views of planning and also our access officer on locations for particularly any freestanding units if they were being proposed, so that we do not cause a problem in the streetscape. And there were also some technical questions about the way that information will be presented within the bus stops for people using buses, which were able to be discussed as well. And I thought it was helpful to air that here, because it has been a conversation that's been ongoing, and I think shows the value in having members of the Access Forum who are engaged in all of the work that we're doing as a council, and having the access officer to go to get that technical input where it's needed to make sure that we, wherever possible, avoid making decisions that are going to cause difficulties later on. In all, I think that this is a really good progress for us to make. We need to refresh this contract. We need to have a contract that covers our bus shelter, related advertising. And this is a really good opportunity for us to do it, and to be absolutely clear that while I am very supportive and have been consulted on this throughout, I am not part of the contract negotiations. So whether or not a manifesto pledge is being supported by any contractor who is making any bids for this is completely and wholly irrelevant to the decision-making process.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. Councillor Coles?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say a couple of things from a health perspective about this paper, which for me is about being led by evidence and the experts, listening to officer advice. Thank you to Peter in particular and to Claire for the work on the paper. But this certainly from a health perspective is about looking at what we can do and how we use the tools that we have available to us to reduce health inequalities in the city. And the balance here, I think, is right. These proposals are about adverts, not individual companies or particular products, but about following the evidence about what we can do to help to try and drive behaviour in a healthier direction without stopping anybody doing anything. Of course, we need all the cash that we can get, but we also have a council plan committed to a health in all approach. And that means we have to be committed to trying to reduce the huge gap in life expectancy that we have in the city. And I know I go on about this a lot, but you know, at the moment, children growing up in my ward in Westfield can expect to live 10 to 12 years less than children living in the wealthiest parts of the city, and that is not right. And this paper is about looking at one aspect of that, which is childhood obesity in particular. And according to the latest data, children in, you know, one of the wards in the city, Rawcliffe and Clifton, for example, children by year 6, by the end of primary school, over a third of them will now be overweight, a trend that is going in the wrong direction in that ward and in most of the other wards in the city. And this, it's, you know, for me, it's slightly disappointing that Councillor Smalley, who represents Rawcliffe and Clifton, felt strongly enough about this to issue a press release, but didn't feel strongly enough about it to take the time to contribute to this discussion this evening in public participation in the democratic process. Like I said, this is not about stopping people doing anything. It's about us using the tools that we have available to us to choose what we are able to advertise in the spaces that we have some control over. We don't advertise smoking. We don't allow racism or hate speech. Why would we be allowing the advertising of products, not companies, that have a proven health impact on our residents, especially and in particular our youngest and most vulnerable residents? As Peter very clearly set out, the impact here is particularly acute with children. And of course, from a health perspective, of course, this doesn't solve everything. This is not about one solution to things, but it does identify our approach and the need to look at how we put health into all of our policies, and ideally that we do that cross-party to try and reverse some of the trends that we've been seeing in the city. I think what matters here is, you know, looking at the public health challenges that we're facing, trying to take the politics out of it, listening to what the experts and the evidence is telling us, and then trying to do our bit as a council to address that. I think this is a really good practical example of our REACH principles as a council. Claire, as I think you said earlier on, that is what this paper does, and I think exec should support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coles. And so following both those speeches, I'd like to draw your attention to the recommendations which are on page 20 and 21. Recommendations 1, 2, 3 and 4. And so they ask us to note the independent market appraisal and the potential revenue opportunities from the place-based advertising, approve the direct award of a new 15-year plus a possible 1-year extension bus shelter advertising and digital freestanding unit concession contract to JC Deco and delegate authority to negotiate and conclude the new concession contract to the Director of Governance in consultation with the Head of Procurement and the Director of Public Health. And then pursuant, recommendation 3 says pursuant to rule 26.1 of the Council's contract procedure rules, approve a waiver of rules 11.4 and 11.7 of the Council's CPRs, i.e. contract procedure rules in relation to the direct award of the new concession contract to JC Deco UK. And then recommendation 4 is to approve the Council's advertising policy, which will be embedded into the bus shelter provision and all place-based advertising contracts with adverts displayed on council-owned or operated land. So can I see those who are in agreement with those recommendations? Thank you, everybody. So that's passed unanimously. And thank you to the officers for your work on that. And thanks for joining us this evening. Right, we go now to agenda item 8, which is recommissioning of the sensory services in York. And we have Sarah Story and also Abid Mumtaz to join us. So please go ahead once you are situated and ready to speak to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report seeks approval to re-procure the sensory services in York, an exercise that hasn't been undertaken for just over 7 years. The sensory services enable the council to meet some important statutory responsibilities under the Care Act and associated legislation. For example, the provision of information and advice, the assessment of sensory needs and support to meet some of those needs, prevention, rehabilitation, and the statutory requirement to maintain the certificate of visual impairment register. So the proposal is to go out with an open tender to procure the service for 3 years plus an option to extend for a further 2 years. I particularly want to thank Abid, who said work with his team to seek to incorporate the views of people with sensory impairments in the city, people that support them and other organisations and stakeholders. And thank you to those individuals and organisations who've provided that feedback to enable us to bring this report to you today. I'm going to stop there. Abid knows much more about this than me, so I'm just going to check that I've not missed anything, if there's anything to add to that.
Yeah, so it could be a brief introduction to the paper over and above what Sarah just articulated, if that's okay. So as Sarah articulated, we'd like to obviously ask for approval from executive to start a competitive tender process for a 5-year overarching contract. We're on a 3+2, with a total contract value of £935,070, which equates to £187,000 per annum. Under the Care Act 2014, it's a legal obligation for us to have the service, but also morally the right thing to do. As I stated, the service itself, it offers things around information and advice, help with CVI registration, sensory impairment assessment, daily living equipment, but also deaf-blind support. Background to the contract. So the contract did start in 2017 on an original 3+2. So therefore it expired in 2022 with an original contract value of £162,000. This was then waived rather than re-procured, and it was waived at £186,000. And the previous, it was refreshing to hear from the previous agenda item of one of the councillors mentioned the importance of procurement legislation. It is important. And we know when we re-procure services, it increases the financial risk that we have, but also the legal challenge that we have. Over and above this, there's a standalone a funding of 16k for SEND, and the whole proposal is to incorporate that within this contract, to have one contract rather than 2 separate ones. So therefore, we'll be hoping to re-procure the service at £187,000, which will bring the original contract back in line with the original contract value. PCR 2014, which was signed by the what was then the coalition government, makes it a legal requirement to pursue value for money. A point of reference, so the paper talks about an overspend. It's not an overspend from the service, and it's an overspend for us as as an authority rather than the service itself. So obviously this presents some risk, but also some opportunities. So there's an opportunity here to do things differently. There's an opportunity for us to be on the right side of procurement legislation, but it's also an opportunity for us to shape the service. And because it's a 7-year-old service, things change, people change. So therefore, we've done an element of co-production with the themes from the survey being the things around increased awareness of the service, more assistive technology, increase with regards to equipment, and increasing ongoing support. The tender will start in the next few weeks, really, with a exercise starting in early May. So just to recap, we're asking for approval to re-procure the service. Any questions?
Thank you, Abid and Sarah. And I should have introduced Sarah Story as our new corporate director of adult social services. And so welcome, Sarah. It's really great to see you here this evening, and welcome to the organisation. We're all really looking forward to working with you. You've been here 4 weeks, I know, but so it's early days, so thank you for that. And can I see those who would like to speak on this item, please? Right, Councillor Eyre, thank you. If we go.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, clearly welcome the continuation of this vital service, and I thank officers for the work they've done in getting to there, and all those involved. I think almost 200 people that took part in the survey to help us get to the specification that we need. We do, however, have some concerns over the proposals in this paper. I think looking at under Bank of England inflation calculations, the value of this contract would have risen from 186,000 to nearer 226,000 by this year. We all know that simple inflation doesn't work with adult social care. And this paper also at paragraph 14 forecasts an increase in demand of almost 20%. That would push the contract value further to nearer £270,000 per year. We would therefore have expected the tender value to increase, but instead this paper and these recommendations actually suggest cutting the value by nearly 10%. The budget passed only a few months ago agreed £4 million of growth in adult social care, £9.4 million growth in pay and price increases, and a further £1.5 million that was hidden away. Your budget allows for growth in demand and for inflationary increases, so it's unclear why this service is receiving a punitive cut of £10,000 and in real terms around 35%.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Abid, would you like to give any technical detail on that, please? Thank you.
Yes, and I suppose I think your last sentence touched on the word cut. It's not a cut to a service, it's a reduction with regards to a tender that's going out to the market. And as we know, with any tender exercise, a tender can go out at £300,000-400,000, but it's based on what comes back from the market. So it's kind of dictated to us by the market itself. And I touched on another key element with regards to some of the changes that have happened. So we've had to increase the cost of the contract from the original value because it wasn't tendered in a legally comparable way. So we were kind of held around some of the costs what the provider could do for us rather than us actually tendering it. So legally, it should have been retendered 2 years ago, which would have brought the prices down anyway. So we're trying to be in a position where we're trying to be fair and open and transparent to the market, but also be affordable with regards to what we're trying to achieve, but also legally compliant.
Thank you, Abid. It's really helpful. And yes, that legal compliance is really important. And I'm really glad to see that over time, we are working towards aligning more and more contracts within our procurement rules that have slipped over the years. And we are doing something about it to bring cost pressures under control. Councillor Coles?
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you to Abid and to Sarah for the report and for all the previous conversations that we have had about this service. I also wanted to thank, this service is currently provided by Wilberforce, one of the oldest, I think the oldest charity in the city. And I just wanted to make sure that we were also thanking their staff for the work that they are doing and have been doing during the period of this contract. They're doing a great job to support some of our vulnerable residents across the city. I also wanted to point out it's actually a really wonderful building that they have. Of Tadcaster Road. They have got a lovely cafe. If anyone hasn't been, it's open to the public and well worth a visit. And just to pick up on Councillor Eyre's point, the timeline here is quite important. Originally, this contract should have been procured re-procured 2 years ago, as that was when the previous contract ran out. That didn't happen. It's a recurring theme. That contract was extended, and as a result, there wasn't a robust process at that point. There couldn't be. The amount, therefore, that the provider received had to be increased to ensure that we could meet our statutory obligations to deliver the service, because we hadn't been through the procurement process. We weren't at that time obviously in a position to negotiate any changes to the contract or to look at the demand in the city, because the procurement process hadn't been undertaken. And yet, of course, we had a statutory duty and had to continue to deliver the service. So it's actually not completely accurate to say that this is a reduction. This is about a procurement process and a return to the base budget from the previous contract. I understand from officers that this is an opportunity, because that's what re-procurement is. It's an opportunity to look at what we need as a procurer and what service deliverers can provide for us, how we might identify and maximise the opportunities for efficiencies in those services, how we look at demand across the city and how it might be changing. But if we don't go through the process, we can't do that. And that is why we haven't had the opportunity to identify efficiencies previously, and savings haven't been identified earlier. And at the risk of harping back to our budget discussions, Councillor Eyre and the old Lib Dem administration have repeatedly identified savings, particularly in adult social care, that were not delivered, and we are not in that business. We're intending to both identify and deliver on the savings and efficiencies that we are identifying, because that is the only option that we have to ensure that we continue to be a financially viable council. Having said that, the council officers have set out the contract value in the paper in line with the previous contract, and I know that that means it will be challenging for the sector. Things are challenging across all local authorities currently, if there was a change of government, we might be in a different position, but that is where we are currently. It is up to the providers now to look at how they can deliver their services and do their best for our vulnerable residents. I just wanted to draw people's attention to the needs assessment and the consultation that's taken place. In particular, Edward, I know in the team, has done a lot of work engaging with other organisations across the city to ensure that we're aware of the needs and the other organisations that are delivering services, and how what their views would be around this service. Obviously, because this contract was last procured 7 years ago, originally for 5 years, the city has changed significantly in that time. Demands have changed. And that engagement with stakeholders is therefore really important. You know, an older woman, for example, and older men are now much more likely to be providing a large amount of care to their loved ones across the city compared to other age groups. And as the paper sets out, is really important, in particular, I think, for this contract, to ensure that our veterans are properly supported by the sensory contract as part of our Armed Forces Covenant. So this is a statutory contract. I think we are now at the start of a really robust process from officers and partners across the city for us to procure this service and deliver well for the residents across the city. And we can now, hopefully, if exec approves the paper, get on with the job of doing that and supporting residents affected by sensory impairment. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coles, and I couldn't agree more. Delivering for the people of York and their specific needs is really important and forms part of our core principles as well, which we are going to get on and do. So the recommendations for this paper are on page 142 and 143. So we've got recommendations A through to, oh gosh, just lost them now. Where am I? That always happens, doesn't it? Press a button and numerous pages go past me. So A to D, back again where I need to be. Recommendation A is to approve the procurement of a new contract for the sensory support service for initial term of 3 years with an option to extend for up to a further 2 years. B, to delegate authority to the Corporate Director of Adult Services, Social Services and Integration and their delegated officers in consultation with Chief Finance Officer and their delegated officers in commercial procurement to commence the procurement from the market. C, to delegate authority to the Corporate Director of Adult Services and Integration and delegated officers in consultation with the Director of Governance and delegated officers to determine the provisions of the new contract. And then D, to delegate authority to the Corporate Director of Adult Services and Integration and delegated officers in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer and delegated officers and the Director of Governance and delegated officers to award and conclude the new contract as we've discussed today. So can I see those who are in agreement with those recommendations? Thank you, everybody, and that's approved. And please go and get on with doing the job now. Marvellous, thank you. Thanks for joining us this evening, really appreciate it. Then we move on to item number 9, which is housing retrofit update. And we have Michael Jones here, and my apologies, I haven't met you before. Anthony Dean, Anthony Dean, sorry, thank you, Anthony, apologies. Please tell us what you want to tell us about this very exciting paper, I have to say. So please, off you go.
Thank you. So I'll briefly set the context and then I'll hand over to Anne, who will talk you through the recommendations in a bit more detail. So previously, the council has approved a retrofit action plan, which outlines the need to retrofit thousands of homes in the city, both within the private sector and the social housing sector. Do that for 3 reasons, primarily to reduce carbon emissions and help us meet our 2030 carbon neutral ambitions, to reduce incidences of fuel poverty, which is a growing challenge across the city, and thirdly, to improve the health outcomes of our homes with a growing amount of evidence around the impact that cold homes have on our mental and physical health. So what the report presents to you is an update, a progress update on some of that activity. So in summary, it references 560 retrofit works across 437 homes, and the recommendations within this report would support the retrofit of a further 237 homes and provision of advice around energy efficiency to 475 homes. I think it's worth noting that this is a step on quite a significant and long journey, and further retrofit opportunities and projects will be brought forward over the coming months and years. So I'll hand over to Ant to talk you through the specific recommendations of this report.
Thank you. Yeah, this report includes a number of items for you to be aware of, to note, and there are some items where specific decisions and approval is being requested. So they are listed on page 241. And one thing I would just note in terms of the recommendations that are put forward, and they are listed as items A through to G, and actually it's a mistype, it actually comes through to A through to E twice and then F. So just apologies for that issue. What I would note is in terms of the issue that we are bringing to you this evening, one is details for note in terms of recently completed housing energy efficiency and retrofit work schemes that have been running over the past year and a half, 2 years, particularly in relation to one which is called the Local Authority Delivery Phase 3, which is known as LAD 3. Another one is the Home Upgrade Grant Wave 1. And the other one is the Social Housing Decarbonation Fund, Wave 1, where in total of 333 measures were installed through those 3 schemes, which have been completed within the last year. And has included a number of measures such as air source heat pump installation, solar voltaic panels, a range of different types of insulation, whether or not that's loft, cavity wall, etc., and smart heating controls being installed in a number of those properties. So it's just really as an update and note that that is what has been undertaken in the last year and a half, 2 years. In addition to that, it's also an update and note really regarding ongoing private sector housing retrofit initiatives that are being undertaken.
including one which is called LEAD, which is a local energy advice demonstrator project, which is one where we're giving advice to property owners in hard to treat properties about how they can potentially improve the energy efficiency rating of their properties. Another one is called Rossi, which is the Regulatory One-Stop Shop York, which is a new project which we've just started in March, and involves ultimately providing an online portal to enable people to get energy advice to help them on the energy and retrofit journey. And then the other one is the SHDF Wave 2, which is the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund Wave 2, which is also ongoing. It's just really an update on that. It also, one of the things to note in particular is the fact that we have entered funding agreements in relation to the LEAD projects, and just for you to be aware of, note that, and also the proposals to continue to do that with additional delivery partners to achieve the outcomes. The third aspect is relation to something called the Home Upgrade Grant 2, and this is really an update to let you know that we are aiming to deliver this project in the foreseeable future, i.e. as quickly as we can, where we're aiming to undertake retrofit works to 60 off-gas privately owned properties in the York area to improve their energy rating and to improve their heating, but also reduce carbon use as a result of that. And there is a recommendation in the report that we approve the signing of a contract with a procured partner called Clear Climate, and also enable officers to actually instigate the starting of that project. And that is one of the proposals that's put forward this evening. The final update specifically is relating to the Net Zero Fund in relation to the delivery of low carbon heating in a couple of council-owned care facilities or the like, which is Alex Lyon House and Honeysuckle House, with again a request to approve the entering into a grant funding agreement with the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority with delegated powers to officers to sign the contract. Again, this is to provide retrofit measures, including the communal heating systems, solar panels, and energy storage solutions to help improve the energy efficiency of these projects. Now, 4 options are given within the report, and officers would recommend and ask that option 1 is approved, which is basically the signing of the HUG 2 contract to commence works and also the net zero grant funding. But unless I can be of any further assistance, that's a summary update for yourself. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Did I hear that you go by Ant rather than Anthony?
Yes, so yeah, Ant is generally what I'm called. I answer to both.
Sorry for being so informal. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it, and have to say that this is hugely exciting and motivating to see all of this activity going on in this area. It's such an important element of what we can do for our residents around environment and reducing our carbon footprint, but also fuel poverty, and making sure that people live in homes that they can afford to heat, and also that are healthy for them as well, and a real adherence to our EACH principles, which I'm really glad to see and very excited. Initial step on our one of our manifesto commitments to insulate as many homes as we possibly can across York, which is absolutely fantastic. So thank you for that. So can I see who would like to speak on this, please? Okay, Councillor Eyre, would you like to start? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, thank officers for the work they've done in this, and it was good to see that Ant had time off on Saturday to go and see the mighty City winning 2-0 at there anyhow. But clearly, we will always welcome a paper that highlights the success of the previous administration. We thank officers for being able to succinctly summarise the success we had in securing millions of funding and delivering on hundreds of homes, and it's glad that the current executive applaud the work that we've done there. As Michael alluded to in the introduction, though, what the paper fails to outline is how in the next 30 months or so, this administration will deliver its pledge to retrofit thousands of homes. The new proposals funding here are around £3 million and will deliver an additional 120 homes. I would ask for a timeline of when the additional homes will be retrofitted to meet the multiple thousands target, or where the 60 to 90 million pounds will come from. But no doubt, as with everything else, you will point to the magic mayoral money tree. Along with all of the administration's cast iron pledges, residents are watching and waiting for you to deliver.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you. It's a shame that this last agenda item has seen the more churlish side of Councillor Eyre. This is a positive story. Yes, energy efficiency, retrofitting is a matter for all parties, and as it should be. Yes, a number of these initiatives were started by the previous administration. They're being delivered by a Labour administration and more. We've already seen 437 homes, a significant proportion of those over the last 12 months. We're not fixated by the delivery of a few highly insulated properties at the expense of the many. That was the plan of the last administration. We're saying we want to engage with other sectors, other partners, with the private sector, with our own existing council stock. That's a good news story. It will take time. It's a process. We have 3-4 years to deliver a step change in principles as well as numbers. And that's what this administration has committed to. The officers, you know, you've already heard from Michael and Ant, but within the whole of the housing maintenance teams, within Anthony's teams within housing standards, they are committed to this process, and therefore we will deliver. We have prioritised energy efficiency, reduction in carbon, net zero, saving bills for residents, and creating healthier environments for our tenants, not just council tenants, but residents of the whole city. So I thank the officers for the work they've done. They will continue to do it. I hope when we start seeing the benefits in health as well as energy, we won't get such churlish responses. But you know, it was ever thus with politics. So I would like to commend the recommendations from the officers. And I appreciate Councillor Kent wants to add a few comments of her own.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic. Councillor Kent, thank you.
Thank you. I'm really just wanting to echo the comments that both you, Councillor Douglas and Councillor Pavlovic have made. It's a really good report. It's a really heartening read. And I want to thank everybody who's been working hard on this, both strategically and the teams on the ground who are actually delivering the work. I've met 2 of them already out in lead projects who are knocking on neighbours' doors. And I've heard from people who have talked about the HUD grant through distribution through councillor networks. This is already having an impact on people on the ground, and that's fantastic. I also want to thank Michael and Ant and all your colleagues for the very welcome and supportive cross-departmental working that's become business as usual between environment and housing. It's really helpful, and it really benefits everybody involved. The co-benefits of all of this are very vividly spelt out in the report, particularly for public health. The steps we need to take to cut carbon emissions also bring direct, tangible improvements to York residents, as everybody said, reducing fuel poverty, creating warmer, healthier homes and healthier, happier people. I want to draw your attention, if I can, to the paragraph 6E of the report. Just for those 62 flats in the independent living complexes at Alex Lyon and Honeysuckle House, not only are we going to save 305 tonnes of carbon equivalent over 10 years, those residents will have a 50% reduction in their fuel bills, and that's going to make a huge difference to them. We want to do more. We need to do more, and especially with better funding, we will do more. But it's really, really important to remember that for every single house that's improved, there's a family or people living in there. And for them, this difference is life-changing. It's a small amount of carbon per house, but it's that person's whole life. That is something really to be celebrated.
Thank you, Councillor Kent, and I couldn't agree more. So with that, we will move to the recommendations and celebrate the positive work that's going on around this page 241 and 242. So we have note the progress achieved so far in the completion of energy efficiency and retrofit upgrade projects under the following grant funded programmes. So we've got HUG 1, LAD 3, I'm just going to use the acronyms, otherwise I could be here all day. And so I will read this one out. Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund Wave 1. Goodness gracious, that's a mouthful, isn't it? B, note the commencement of new energy efficiency and retrofit projects. And so that's the local energy advice demonstrator project, the Rossi Retrofit One Stop York, and Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund Wave 2. So all new projects under the Labour administration. Well done, everybody. HUG 2 is, we go into recommendation C, approve the council entering into the home upgrade grant phase 2 delivery contract with Clear Climate as the winning bidder of the recent procurement exercise. And D, to delegate authority to the Director of Housing, Economy and Regeneration in consultation with Head of Procurement and Director of Governance or delegated officers to conclude the terms of the HUG 2 contract with Clear Climate. Recommendation E is to note the signing of grant funding agreements as part of the local energy advice demonstrator with partners Joseph Rowntree Housing Trust. Note the intention to enter further grant funding agreements with York Conservation Trust, York Travellers Trust and Leeds Beckett University to enable the delivery of high quality retrofit service and advice which target properties which are hard to treat. Then we go into Net Zero Fund, which is listed as recommendation E also, but should be F. Approve the council entering into the grant funding agreement with York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority for the Net Zero Fund allocation for Alex Lyon House and Honeysuckle House, totalling 1.895 million, and delegate to the Director of Housing, Economy and Regeneration in consultation with Head of Procurement and Director of Governance or delegated officers authority to conclude terms of the grant funding agreement. And then F, which should be listed as G, delegate authority to the Director of Housing, Economy and Regeneration in consultation with Head of Procurement and Director of Governance or delegated officers to carry out procurement processes in compliance with the Council's contract procedure rules and the Public Contract Regulations 2015 to seek suppliers for the delivery of the Net Zero Fund projects at Alex Lyon House and Honeysuckle House, and subsequently enter into contracts covering design, consultancy services and construction works. And as Ant pointed out to us, option 1 in the paper covers all of those recommendations, and that is my advice to you, and I'm recommending that we go with option 1 and approve all of those recommendations that I've just read out to you. So can I see those who are in favour of that proposal? Thank you. So that's approved unanimously, and fantastic. And as I said to the last officers who asked us for contractual agreements, now you can go and do it. Thank you very much. Marvellous. Thanks for that. And thanks for joining us this evening. So going back to the agenda, I am pretty sure all I've got on here is urgent business now. As under item 10, urgent business, I've not been notified of any. So with that, we will bring the meeting to a close, and thank you to everybody for joining us this evening for a very positive outcome. I think we can all agree. Well done, everybody, for all your work. Good evening.